you know, what's the E? Because otherwise you really run the risk of comparing apples to oranges. Price to book, you get basically the same story, okay? Lots of volatility in levels year to year, so you want to think about where you are at any given point in time, skewed distribution, and the whole 9 yards. This is the fun part. Challenges to value investing. And what I'm going to focus on here is basically the behavioral obstacles to value investing. And I don't think we're going to get to them all, but there's a lot of market obstacles that get in the way of successfully implementing a strategy, and a lot of obstacles that I'll say are investor based, you know, whether it's somebody's time horizon or tax profile. So let's have fun a little bit with the behavioral stuff. I think all I'll say about this to move things along a little bit is that this chart basically says that investors are almost always doing the wrong thing. Right? They get in right as the market has its peak, and they get out right after it's done its dirty work. So, and they just do this repeatedly, time and time again. It's not just individual investors investing in mutual funds. It's institutional investors, it's pension funds, it's private equity funds, it's arbitrage strategies. Everyone chases performance, and they get killed. When you get killed when you chase performance. So the question is, why do we do that? Anyone know who this is? You wouldn't, because you guys are all finance students, right? Anybody psychology majors? Psychology minors? It's Solomon Asch from Swarthmore College. And he ran some great experiments in the 50s that really looked at the influence of peers in people's decision making, right? Peer pressure. And what he would do is he would target out a victim in his classes. And he'd have everyone else in the class be an accomplice, and they would do a vision test. Okay, and then say, okay, here's the baseline, and I want everybody to tell me which line A, B, or C is the same size as the baseline. And he would get everyone in the class to say, in this case, A. Everyone would say A, and they'd go around the room, A, and then you'd be the patsy. And it'd come around to you, you'd be like, A, right? A is obviously not right, but the vast majority of the time, the patsy yielded to the view of the class. And it was, regardless of how well educated the patsy was. Now, did some other experiments, and as long as there was, you know, maybe 2 other dissenters that actually said the right answer before it got around to the patsy, that sometimes was enough for the patsy to have the fortitude to say, all right, yes, in fact, it is C, okay? But without that, they almost always gave the wrong answer when they knew in their heart of hearts it wasn't right, okay? And it's not just influence from peers, right? It's influence from authority as well. Do you know who this guy is? This is Stanley Milgram. You probably know his experiment when I describe it. Okay? It's the electricity experiment. And the idea was you have this experimenter that recruits a test subject to administer electrical shocks to a victim. And this test subject is led to believe you want them to find out how much electricity somebody can tolerate. And they take direction from the experimenter to administer the electricity to the victim behind the wall. Now, this is not really happening, but the test subject doesn't know that. And the subject is told to apply increasing amounts of electricity. And each time he does, he hears greater screams from beyond the wall. And yet, 2/3 of the time, the test victim yields to the authority who says, no, apply the electricity, despite these curdling screams coming from the other room. So what is this telling us about value investing? What it's telling us is that you need to be independently minded, and you need to hang out with like-minded folks. It's very difficult to be a value investor in a room full of growth investors or even a room full of indexers. Okay? So seek out like-minded folks and rely on that. It's kind of like a support. What other kind of vulnerabilities do we subject ourselves to? Let me ask you this. The letter K, is that more likely to be the first letter in a word, or is it more likely to be the third letter in the word? Raise your hand if you think it's more likely to be the first. And the third. Okay, so it's about split. It's 3 times more likely to be the third. But at least half of us have thought of words like kick and kite, right? And that's because the first letter, my son's 5 years old, he's learning how to read, all he sees are first letters in words, right? That's the only way he knows to identify the word. He's got a first letter, sometimes the last, right? But that's what's present on our mind, that's what we go to first, that's our heuristic, it's our shortcut, rather than go through and actually do a calculation of whether first or third is more common. Another thing is how heavily we rely on stories and anecdotes to form our estimates of probabilities or anything else. So consider Mary, who's a quiet, studious, and concerned person, concerned about social issues. She's an undergraduate at Berkeley who majored in English. She minored in environmental studies. So I want to ask you, which is more probable? Is it more probable she's a librarian, that she's a librarian and a member of the Sierra Club, or that she works in the banking industry? Who says A, most probable she's a librarian? Couple. Who says it's most probable Mary is a librarian and a member of the Sierra Club? Okay, about a third. And C, works in the banking industry. All right. So not everybody voted, by the way. This is America. All right. Well, let's go through this. Okay. First of all, B is an impossibility. It's statistically impossible because this set of outcomes is a subset of that set of outcomes. So it must be less probable than that. Statistically, that's off the table. So the question comes down to, is it more likely Mary is a librarian or in the banking industry? There are 150,000 librarians in the United States. There are over 1 million people in the banking industry in the United States. It is about 6 times more likely that Mary is in the banking industry than it is that she is a librarian. Why did we gravitate toward many of us? The least likely, and maybe the second less likely result, reason is because of the story behind this. We weren't focusing on the statistics. The other thing we focus on is really avoiding losses. We hate to lose money. Hate it. It's like a punch in the stomach. All right? So let me illustrate this to you. You guys got in here for free, which, you know, it's great. There's not too many free things in life. But I'm going to run a little experiment. We're going to shut the doors. And although it was free to get in, it's going to cost you $1,000 to get out. It's like a hotel in California. And